I'm close. I'm so close. When I throw this extra-large knife switch, my latest creation will come alive. A cow with the brain of a man. A man-cow, Igor.
It's Gregor.
Do you like cow man or man-cow?
I don't really have an opinion, Dr. Wolfenstein, but could I talk to you about...
Where's the beaker? I need a beaker full of green liquid with dry ice at the bottom.
What for?
Because it looks cool. Because I'm a mad scientist, and mad scientists always have those beakers.
Doctor, I know you're busy, but I've been meaning to bring up my...
But not now. Can't you see this is the moment? One more adjustment to the induction coil, and my cowman will rise.
Dr. Wolfenstein, I'm always trying to talk to you about this, and it's always the wrong time. Yesterday was the giant mosquito with the head of a real estate agent.
Oof, poor bugger. Did you get rid of the body yet?
The thing is, you aren't even paying me minimum wage. Right now, that's $8.70 an hour here in Connecticut, but you...
Money? Who cares about money? We're not in it for that, Calgore. We're in it for the intoxication of scientific discovery.
You're in it for that. I'm trying to pay off my student loans.
Hey, you get to live for free in this castle.
It's a storage unit. Anyway, I live with my parents. I'm not even sure you noticed my comings.
Okay. Just write down what you're looking for, and I'll take it up later when I'm meeting with my mysterious patron whose money and assistance only lead to the inevitable final confrontation where half the lab gets destroyed. Now, can we please animate the cowman?
Why? I mean, what does this even accomplish, having a human brain and a cow? Why bother?
Because... You know what, Smugger? I totally forgot why I'm doing this experiment, and it's your fault. You got me all sidetracked with this minimum wage stuff, but I'll tell you one thing. My man-cow will do whatever I tell him to do, and he won't be asking for any $8.70 an hour. Hey, wait, I could sell a whole bunch of them to the fast food industry, but would cows be willing to work at Burger King? Maybe only KFC. While I figure that out, here's the guy who burned his Walmart uniform in protest. Colin McEnroe.
That's right. We're talking about the minimum wage today, and in fact, President Obama will be in just a little while in New Britain at Central Connecticut State University for a rally in support of higher minimum wages. He will be surrounded by governors, not only from our state, but from neighboring states as well. We thought that was a good time to actually talk about the minimum wage debate here in America. To do that, we have experts, two different kinds of experts, the kinds of experts who study minimum wage and who look at policy. We also have the kinds of experts who make minimum wage. So with us right now is Jim Stoddard, our go-to economist. He's a professor who teaches economics at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Also with us, Victor Burgos. He's a minimum wage worker at Burger King. You can also hear in the background, that's his little daughter, Isabella, who's also joining us today. Because when you make minimum wage, you can't necessarily, just go hire a sitter. Chris D'Alessandro is a voiceover talent with an MBA, but she works various jobs, one of which is for a minimum wage. As we go along, we'll be talking also on the phone to a bunch of other people who make minimum wage and people who do study the phenomenon and study the debate. As we go along, too, we welcome your phone calls, 860-275-7266. 860-275-7266. Jim Stoddard, James Carville used to say that he was trying to find a one-armed economist so that the guy couldn't say on the other hand. But I'm actually going to ask you to do that, to say on the other hand. There's a debate here about minimum wage. I think most people sort of understand the issue of wage inequality. A lot of people want to address it. The debate has to do with what happens if we do raise the minimum wage. Do we get the consequences we want or unintended consequences? So lay that out for us a little bit.
Okay. There is a debate among economists, but something to make reference to is a recent CBO, Congressional Budget Office, study, which is cited by both conservative and not so conservative economists. And the conservative economists look mostly at the simple model, which is, when the price of something goes up, the demand for it goes down, and that includes the price of labor in most situations. Labor economists and people who look at the data more tend to see small, very, very small effects of some people losing their jobs, but the overall idea from the evidence from the CBO report is about 50 more times people are helped by the minimum wage than people who might lose their job. They estimate about 500,000 people could lose their job, and that's about 3% of the numbers of people who would be helped by it.
Well, I didn't read the CBO study so much as I read a summary of it. It
Right.
seemed a little inconclusive and a little bit fuzzy, too. I think it said it could be less than 500,000 jobs lost. It could be as many as 1 million
It's
jobs
always fuzzy. That's the nature of statistical estimates. And you could say that there's about an 80% chance that the loss will be less than 1 million people, about a 97% chance that the loss will be less than 1.5 million. But there's also some possibility that there's gain. They look at about 64 different studies, empirical studies, and they're all centered around very, very small effects. On balance, slightly negative, but sometimes positive for reasons we can get into.
So one of the questions that we get into immediately is how do you address income inequality? One way to do that is to raise the minimum wage, and we'll talk as we go along today about the kind of ripple effect that might have. Another argument that's making the rounds right now is you can target it better with something called the Earned Income Tax Credit, which basically delivers relief through the pipeline of the government as opposed to the pipeline of the business world, but delivers relief to low-income workers, to the working poor. It's sort of interesting, too, Jim, because there's a little bit of reverse of the typical political polarity on this in the sense that Republicans seem to like the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a government instrument right now, better than they like the minimum wage.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about how honestly the people who are arguing for it like it. Last time I looked, most of the conservative Republicans are against policies which would require down the road either an increase in taxes or an increase in debt, because this would be government spending, direct government spending to top up the wages. I think the Earned Income Tax Credit is a good thing, but I think both things are needed. The benefit of the Earned Income Tax Credit is it doesn't go to people who are not around the poverty line. It goes only to people who can show by their earnings that they're in that area. Whereas minimum wage goes to everybody who is getting the minimum wage. The downside is that the minimum wage gives low-income workers a floor and some bargaining power that they wouldn't otherwise have. With the Earned Income Tax Credit, you can actually get, say, a fall. Some of the studies show that you could get a fall in the number of teenagers getting minimum wage because now it's more attractive to hire more experienced older people. So you make it more attractive for the people to hire people at the minimum wage jobs, and you're actually, rather than a fall in the number of those people, you can actually get some substitution of people towards those minimum wage jobs. So that's not necessarily a good thing.
I mean, another part of it is just to look at the Earned Income Tax Credit kind of carves out one sector of the wage spectrum and says, we're targeting relief at you. But it doesn't really deal with the overall pipeline, the overall continuum of what people make. I mean, it's unlikely that anybody else will make more money as a result of the working poor getting more money through EITC.
Right.
Whereas theoretically, if you deal with a minimum wage for reasons that we'll explain here, if you raise the minimum wage, you not only benefit it's the rising tide lifting all boats. You won't not only benefit the minimum wage workers, but there's a ripple effect that goes
exactly.
through the
And the CBO study estimates that you get about 16 million people who are helped directly by the minimum wage and about 8 million who are helped indirectly, who are getting low wages but above the minimum. They get bumped up by it, essentially, by labor market effects. So it's many more people are helped by it than are hurt by it, but some are hurt.
So let's talk to some people kind of living on the front lines of this whole question. And so, Victor Burgos, you're here today. You're a minimum wage worker at Burger King. You're here with your lovely daughter, Isabella.
Thank you.
First of all, what would it mean? Actually, before you speak, let's hear the first clip from Governor Daniel P. Malloy. So he'll be there in New Britain today with President Obama. They're both basically talking about the same thing. They're talking about the same kind of minimum wage hike. So let's hear Governor Malloy.
The rising tide should raise all boats. The economy is slowly but surely getting better. It's time to share that with the folks who do some of the hardest jobs that America has. And it's a good way to put money back into our economy, into our local economies. I mean, a minimum wage earner is not going to go out and buy a lot of stocks and bonds in New York or London. They're going to plow that money back into a local economy.
All right, so that's Dan Malloy talking about the raise. I'm going to give Victor a chance to he's doing a little, hold on, Isabella, a little bit. So I'll go over to you, Chris D'Alessandro. You're in a slightly different situation. I mean,
Correct.
You do bunches of different jobs, but you've experienced life on the minimum wage front lines. What does it look like to you?
I have to be honest and just say that it is. It feels a little overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not only putting gas in my vehicle, I'm also putting gas in another vehicle, my mother's vehicle. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I do have other responsibilities, even though I don't have my own children. Just like in Victor's case, it's very frustrating. I think it would be. I'm kind of on the fence. It would be a good thing for it to increase to $10 an hour. However, I'm worried about the overall ripple effect later on.
You're worried about the ripple effect on jobs, right?
Jobs and actually. Inflation, period, because once inflation kicks in, everybody who is at minimum wage is going to be back at square one again.
Mm-hmm. Is that a reasonable? I see you nodding over there.
There is.
Go right to the mic there, though.
Yeah, there are inflation effects, and the CBO report and other good empirical work do try to take account of that. And they reckon that one way to say it is if it was just the increase in the minimum wage from $8.70 to $10.10, which is what we're talking about in 2 years' time, that's about a 16% increase. The actual overall increase that they estimate for the poorest of the poor is much less than that. It's about 5%. So there are countervailing factors like inflation, but there are also good factors. That is, more money in people's pockets means they're going to spend more. So there's a mix of factors there, but on the whole, it's slightly positive, I think.
So, Victor Burgos, you're working for Burger King. I assume you're making state minimum wage right now there?
Yes, $8.70 an hour.
Yeah. And so, what would the increase mean to you? I mean, would it be a substantially good change for you if it went up to say $10.10?
Well, it's a good change, but we still fighting for $15 an hour because $10.10, they're only going to help us but for so long. Minimum wage went up to $8.70. I seen they already cutting hours back.
So, and you're sort of in some ways echoing what was said there before too, that it might help you for a little while. Inflation might also catch up to it. So, when you say we're fighting for $15 an hour, you're part of a movement that's in favor of collective bargaining, right?
Yes.
For the unionization and collective bargaining right of fast food workers. Tell us about that.
Like, I joined because I seen a lot of people in my job and they were scared to speak up to the manager asking for more money. And I'm like, you know what? Somebody got to do it. So I let me join the team and let's see if we can make some type of positive thing come out of this.
Our number 860-275-7266. We're happy to hear your calls. Here's Emily in Windsor. I mean, it's one thing to talk about Walmart, about Burger King, about McDonald's. It's another thing, obviously, to talk about small businesses, some of which are operating on a very thin margin. So here's Emily in Windsor with a story like that. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Go ahead. So tell us what your concern is.
Well, I own a really very small bakery in Windsor called Get Baked, and we have just hit our second year in business, and we pay everyone minimum wage right now. My whole family works for free, and my fiance and I don't get paid at all. We are currently continuing to drain our 401k accounts just so that we can survive, in the hopes that soon we will be able to hire people past minimum wage and be able to pay them more. I absolutely understand that the minimum wage needs to be higher and people need to earn a living wage, but what I think that people aren't understanding is that if it goes up for small businesses like us, it doesn't just go up on the front there. You know, my unemployment taxes are going up and all sorts of other things are going up, and it's hard for me to justify paying a 16-year-old kid to come in and wash dishes for $10 an hour and then have his parents claim him or her as a dependent and get money back on that. I just feel like there should be some sort of a sliding scale for small businesses. It feels that they're out to target big corporations, but they're not thinking about the small people like us.
It's a great point, and I'm so glad that you did call in. And so, Jim, when I look at the sort of the big corporation picture, I do wind up saying to myself, well, Starbucks and Costco and stuff like that, they're able, in fact, to pay their employees something much more resembling a living wage, often along with benefits. Why can't these other companies do it? But it's harder to direct that at somebody like this, Emily, who's really trying to build something right now. And during that time she's trying to build something, she's probably not taking very much money out of the business herself, it sounds like. Can she pay $10.10 an hour? She doesn't think so.
Right. No, I mean, I can't argue with her experience. I'm sure she's being realistic. One thing I'd say that it is possible to pay teenagers less than the minimum wage in a training period under the so-called FSLA, the Fair Standards for Labor Act, which goes back to the Depression. You can pay them something like $4.50 an hour for the first 90 days, something like that, a kind of break-in period. So that might address some of her concerns. And there are also other workers. Actually, in Connecticut, only about, according to the Department of Labor, only about less than 3% of all workers get minimum wage, and most of those actually get below the minimum wage. They're restaurant workers who, because they get tips, the wage for restaurant workers is very low. It's like $2.13 an hour. That's an exact figure. So there are some ways that where the minimum wage isn't as hard and fast as you would think. But I can't argue with her experience. I'm sure it's true.
Chris, you've worked at minimum wage jobs. I saw you nodding, though, as Emily was talking. Why were you nodding?
That was the other thing, too, is once again, and where I said I'm on the fence and overall for it and against it, because of the fact that you have small business owners like Emily out there who are struggling as it is to keep going, keep everything flowing. And, as she said that, her and I would believe it was her fiance, they're draining their 401 account to keep afloat. So by forcing somebody like her to go ahead and pay workers, $10 an hour, it's going to be more of a strain and possibly put her out of business. So it's a frustrating fact that if something like that for her, who is a small business owner, she's trying to do something good, create jobs to, help stimulate the job industry, and yet you're putting her back to square one, and basically, she's going to either sink or swim, possibly sink more than swim.
Victor Burgos, maybe give us a sense. I think it's one thing to talk about minimum wage and making minimum wage. It's another thing to live on it. Give us a sense. What kinds of choices, what kinds of decisions? First of all, how many hours do you get? Because I know a lot of minimum wage workers don't get the hours they want because obviously that triggers a whole bunch of other employer obligations.
I get about 25 hours a week. And, we do about like 25 hours a week. Sometimes the business be slow, so they cut back our hours. At times I don't work 16 hours. And me traveling back and forth to work, I'm burning gas. Mm-hmm. And it just don't be enough for me. I'm sorry. And I'm not trying to put anybody underneath the bus, but we got families in Connecticut who's struggling every day, wondering how we going to feed the kids, how we going to pay our bills. At times where I got to pay my bills late. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. If you hear Victor go off mic every once in a while, his daughter, Isabella, who's very well behaved and a delightful little girl, is here. And every once in a while, being a good father, he looks over to make sure she hasn't gotten in some kind of trouble. So, Victor, one of the things that you're part of, or you've been approached by, I guess, is this movement Fast Food Forward, right? This idea of collectively organizing, collectively bargaining for better wages. I'm just going to play a little clip. It turns out sort of the new rock star of this movement is Nequasia Legrand, who appeared on the Colbert Report recently. She's a member of Fast Food Forward. She's discussing organizing strikes for her fellow fast food workers and arguing for increasing the minimum wage here on the Colbert Report.
You say you're only working 15 hours a week, right
Yes,
now?
Yes, sir.
Why not get a second job someplace else and just work there when you're not working at KFC?
Because my manager don't give me a set schedule. If I want to have that extra income, there's no reason why I should have a second job when these multi-billion dollar companies have the money to pay me in the work that I do. I shouldn't have to have a second job.
It's a multi-billion-dollar company. It's a multi-billion-dollar company, yes, but let's keep in mind that the chairman is only making $11 million this year.
Jim Stoddard, this is sort of an interesting thing. Obviously, the influence of labor is, waning all across other sectors of the American economy. The notion that you could organize the lowest wage workers is something we haven't really heard until recently, and I don't know how realistic it is, and I also don't want to put you on the spot about that exactly. But what does it mean to you? How does that look to you?
The United States has one of the lowest portion of its workforces organized in labor unions of any advanced industrial country. We also, not by coincidence, have one of the most unequal distributions of income. I think there's growing evidence and even a growing consensus, a recent IMF study by the head researcher there, that growing income inequality makes the entire economy more unstable, makes it more prone to shocks. And so I think that's one reason to like things like the Earned Income Tax Credit and the minimum wage, is that they would both move you slightly, not a whole lot, in the direction of more equal pay. And so I think it's a good thing for fast food workers to have more power and to be able to organize about their conditions and their wages.
Let me grab a quick break here. We got a lot of. I won't give out the phone number right now because we have so many calls that have already come in here. People who want to talk about this. I'll give it out anyway. 860-275-7266. You can also tweet us at WNPR Colin, where our tweet master Greg Hill is in the house. The minimum wage, the minimum wage.
I think it should be increased because it's not a living wage for most people, and taxpayers pay for it either way, whether we pay in welfare benefits, we're paying for these people on health care, on welfare, so if the minimum wage rises, I'd like the corporations to shoulder some of that burden.
I do feel if you work 40 hours a week, you do deserve to get a decent wage. But I also am a very capitalist person, and I believe in capitalism. You can pay somebody what they want to. If they want to take that job, great. If they don't want to, then they don't have to take it.
The cost of living adjustments just haven't kept up. So we need a minimum wage. We've needed it years ago.
I think it should be increased because people, right now people are going through a lot of hardship in this world, and I think if they increase it, it will make it a better place, and people will get along better instead of people going out there and doing things they're not supposed to do.
I don't think it matters much. I think you can increase the minimum wage for some folks, but if there's a cutback in the number of jobs available due to an increased minimum wage, you're going to end up with a net sum of zero. A few more people will be paid more, but a few other people won't be employed at all.
All right, we're back. We're talking about the minimum wage. We're talking to people who study it and people who live on it. Let me grab a few calls here. Well, first of all, we've got another guest here who agreed to come on and talk about life on minimum wage, and we'll actually get to her in just a second. Here's Donna in New Haven. Hi, Donna.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine.
I just wanted to make a comment as I'm switching laundry from the washing machine to the dryer, that I'm working for just a little bit over minimum wage, and I work with, I'm just going to call them young people. They're not worth half of what they're being paid. They don't want to work. They just want to goof around and play.
So you're talking about more like high school kids?
No, these, as far as I'm concerned, they're adults. They're over the age of 20. They're still living at home, and they may say they're living paycheck to paycheck, but the reality is they're living phone bill to phone bill. I sympathize with people who are trying to make ends meet, who have families, but the reality is if you want to make more money, you got to improve yourself. You have to get yourself a little bit of an education, and you got to work hard. You can't just walk in the door and be in charge.
I'm looking around the studio. There's a lot of body language here. So, Chris, did you want to respond to that? You're like holding your head.
Donna, I love you. No, I have to agree with her on that, too, because I work many different industries, and different pay rates. I'm normally on call a lot for my jobs, And I go into jobs where I see these younger folks, and she, as she said, she calls them kids. And I believe it's like anybody who's like under the age of like 28. They just, I want to say they have no clue. They have no clue on how real life is because, as she said, they are living with mom and dad. And that's all they live for is to, basically party and pay their phone bills. And that's it.
So that's one class of minimum wage workers. Victor, I assume that's not your class of minimum wage worker.
Nah. Mine's, I say more like I work, pay bills, and support the kids.
Isabella, yeah. Let me grab a call here. This is actually a guest that we've sort of arranged to talk to you today. This is Daniela Gianfrido, one of the other people who's on minimum wage who agreed to join us today. Daniela is a minimum wage worker at Stop and Shop. Hi, welcome to the discussion.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So yeah, go ahead.
I totally agree with Donna. I'm actually working part-time at Stop and Shop, you just said. We have tons of kids who goof around, I'm a single mom of 2 children. I attend adult education in Middletown to better my life. Excuse me, I'm going to get emotional. To better my life for my children. Thanks to the Even Start program that I can attend adult education, because if I wasn't able to attend, if I didn't have childcare for my daughter to attend adult education, I wouldn't be able to get an education to better my life. I live paycheck by paycheck. I try the best I can to be a good mom to my children. I don't get assistance. According, my rent's going up with my new lease. I pay almost $1,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. The good thing that I do have, I get some help, for, food stamps and stuff like that. But, it would be a little bit better to, increase the minimum wage. I do get $10 an hour at Stop and Shop, but because of the hours and, the time of the year that we're not getting business, my hours are getting cut. And, like Donna said, there's kids that really don't care about working, and the only thing they care about is making the money and, partying and, making sure they have their cell phones paid and, living at home with mom and dad and not having a responsibility. And I'm always that one coworker that's like, give me the hours. I'll take the hours, I'll stay late. Whenever you need me, I'm here, whether it's 1 o'clock in the morning or, I'm always there. And it's kind of a struggle because, like you said before, what about, getting a second job? I would love to have a second job, but there's times where my children need my time and, going to school and benefiting, my life with my education and to get a better job.
Danielle, I'm so glad you called. These are the voices that we want to hear here. And,
Thank you.
And first of all, congratulations to you for the kind of pluck and energy and determination that you're showing.
Thank you.
This just sounds like a very, very difficult juggling act that you're doing right now. So we obviously we applaud your initiative. And, Jim Stoddard, there's one thing that keeps coming up here. It came up with Chris, I think, to a certain degree. It certainly came up with Victor, who, by the way, Daniela was nodding when you were talking about you're the person who says, I'll take the hours. I want the extra hours.
Right.
Victor totally gets that, too. But, one thing that everybody does, Jim Stoddard, when we talk about minimum wage, you find out whatever the hourly rate is that's being quoted, whether it's $7.25, the federal, or $8.70 here in Connecticut, or $10.10, this possible target, or $15, which people like Fast Food Forward talk about, and then they multiply it times 40. That's what everybody automatically does. Everybody who's not on minimum wage goes, okay, so what's that times 40 hours? Right. But in fact, that's almost never the sense I'm getting from Victor, from Daniela, from lots of people is that's almost never the reality because obviously that triggers all kinds of other employer obligations.
Right. A point about part-time workers and young workers. I'm just looking at some stats. Most teenagers who have jobs are low-wage workers, overwhelmingly. But most of the people that are at or near the minimum wage are not teenagers. It's 88% are not teenagers, according to Labor Department stuff. And as far as part-time, it's about half and half. That is, of all low-wage workers, about half of them work less than 35 hours a week, which is what's considered part-time. So it is if you're a part-time worker, another way to look at it is if you're a part-time worker, you're much more likely to be a low-wage worker than a full-wage worker, you could call it.
So that's sort of the bitter paradox of this.
Right. And I see, and it's painful to hear about these people who are working hard and these employers who are trying to do a good job, and they're running up against that that employability and wage limit. I mean, look, it's a really blunt instrument, the minimum wage. It's not an ideal instrument. I think it's possible that a better balance with the earned income tax could be worked out. One of the callers mentioned perhaps there could be a sliding scale, or maybe that small employers could be helped with. They would actually be helped with an earned income tax credit because they would be able to hire more low-wage workers, and the workers would get topped up by it. So I think there's a long way to go to make things better.
There is a real irony that and that I really hadn't turned over in my mind all that much, that these people like Victor, people like Daniela, who really need the hours. I mean, that's what they need, although the hours will sometimes bump up against childcare considerations and stuff like that, but they really need the hours. And they're the people least likely to get the maximum number of hours. They're just not going to get 40 because their employers won't do it. Let's grab a call from Michaela, and because one of the things that was emerging from the conversation with Chris and with Daniela and some other people is one solution would be to have a box on the employment form saying, are you a young person who's here to just goof off and pay your cell phones, or check here, or are you actually here for real and you actually need to support your family? And then just have a two-tier wage system based on that. Here's Michaela, though. I think she has sort of a different vision of that.
So I'm a young person, and I'm 28, and I just want to say that I think it's a gross misgeneralization to say that young people under the age of 28 are kids and that we're not really motivated to work at the same pace or with the same investment as older adults. And I think that this is a disservice to the current generation of young people. And, I've looked at a lot of the research in this area, and, there's all these prevalent theories that, we're narcissistic and we have a failure to launch and we're the boomerang generation. Well, what opportunities are available to us to actually have a meaningful work experience? We're just transitioning into this period, and so we're transitioning into a society that just always talks so negatively about us that why would we take it seriously? I take it seriously as somebody who's moved up from, minimum wage and really sought out the experiences, gone to school, and put sleep way behind just getting, working as hard as I possibly could. But, for my generation, we're struggling, man. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your call. We did do a show about millennials that kind of explored some of this, although maybe not quite as viscerally as she just put it. One of the real differences I think that's happening right now is that there's sort of an equalization going on where people in the past who had minimal education, maybe finished high school, maybe hadn't, versus people who had some college or had finished college. There was much more of a multi-tier system there. But a lot of times these days, it seems like they're kind of coming in on the same level. Everybody's fighting for that same job that's at or slightly above minimum wage. Chris, what were you going to say?
But about Michaela, really quick, at least she's also at that teetering point where she's kind of separating herself, which I'm very happy for. But obviously, she sounds like she's educated. She's doing the right thing, and she is right. There is no opportunity. And Colin, as you said, that we're all fighting, for that. There's hundreds of candidates fighting for one excellent paying job. I finished my MBA 2 years ago, and I was all gung ho even 6 months before I graduated. Applying for jobs and just putting my irons out there, and nothing came up because why? I was going up against a whole bunch of other people, and it's once again back to the the frustrating factor.
All right, so we're talking about that. Thanks very much for that, Chris. Let's grab a call. We've got some other guests that are scheduled to come on here. One of the groups that has voiced some opposition anyway to the notion of raising the minimum wage here in Connecticut to $10.10 is the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, CBIA. Here's Bonnie Stewart, Vice President for Government Affairs at CBIA. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, CBIA, my recollection is that in years past in some of the other minimum wage debates, I think I remember CBIA staying a little bit neutral on this. And am I correct about that, and that you've maybe shifted your position a little bit?
We have not been as involved in the past on this issue. The bulk of our members do not pay minimum wage, but what we've seen as the minimum wage or the base wage keeps on ratcheting up, is that it's increasing costs in many factors concerning employers because Connecticut is such a high-cost state. And what we really think the focus should be for the people who are now currently low-wage or no-wage workers is to really help them in terms of their skills. One of the biggest problems that Connecticut employers face, particularly manufacturers right now, is we're having a lot of trouble finding people with the skills to fill our jobs. So you've got people that have college degrees, I understand that, but we have really a shortage of skilled workers in Connecticut, and that's a big, big problem. Connecticut has a lot of manufacturers who cannot find people with basic machine skills, math, science, computer, et cetera, to enter their workforce. And so we have a lot of jobs that are going unfilled that are good wages, good benefits, and we're really hoping that we can focus a lot more on how to get these low-wage workers into jobs that are really careers for them.
Which is all a great point, Bonnie. Although, I mean, I'm sitting here with a guy who's sitting here with his toddler on his lap. He looks pretty tired. He's trying to make it right now. I mean, I'm sure he'd love to have some of that training and be on that track that gets him into a higher-paying job that comes with a whole new set of skills. But that's all tomorrow or tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. It's pie in the sky right now. At the moment, he needs to just be able to put food on his table and a coat on his little kid's back. And the stuff that you're talking about short term doesn't do him any good, right?
I would say no, because there are a lot of programs out there that don't require, it's not a 4-year degree, it's not a 2-year degree even. And if we keep on putting it off, and just saying, hike the minimum wage, you're going to run into trouble. You're going to have certain jobs that are available in Connecticut that aren't going to leave because, you need the gas station on the corner, you need the food store, that type of thing. But really, if we're talking about people looking at those as a place to make their career and earn their living to feed a family, you're never going to be okay because those are the same places that are selling the food and clothing, and therefore you're just going to hike up the cost of living even more. What we really need to do is to make sure that there's a connect and some way to help these individuals find the programs that are out there, because there are a lot of programs at no or low cost. My son recently participated in one, came back from the Army, didn't want to go to college, was able to participate in a program through CREC in the Hartford area.
Although, let me just
become an energy worker.
Let me just ask you this. Let's say hypothetically that Victor gets in one of those programs and, in fact, does participate successfully and gets the kind of job that you're talking about. There's still going to be somebody working at Burger King. There's still going to be somebody pumping gas. It won't be Victor. He'll have a better job. I'll be happy for him. But there's going to be somebody else in that job making a salary. And so you're still kind of making the argument that that person has to live on whatever they come out of, 25 or 30 hours a week at $8.70 or whatever it is, that they've got to live on that, even though somebody else got that other job.
Well, if you're talking about who traditionally performed those jobs in the past, they were the teenagers. They're the 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. There were people who had a part-time job while they were in high school or a part-time job in college, and then people had developed skills. We had a lot more technical training programs that people got involved in early on. Right now, our youth unemployment in Connecticut is in the mid to high 20s. So there's lots of opportunities. You've got kids all over the place saying, we can't find jobs. So it's not that there's not going to be anybody filling those jobs. There's a real need for jobs for our youth right now as well. We're just saying that increasing the minimum wage is not it's not the answer. It's not going to take care of all the problems. What we really need to do is to make sure, and we are big on education at CBIA, our members need people with the skills to enter the workforce. And if instead you're making, every retail job a high-paying job, we're never going to have the people to really be in the core industries that support Connecticut's economy, like our manufacturers. So we're really looking to make this discussion far broader than, who's earning the minimum wage and why we should just increase it, as opposed to having it be, let's expand the skills and expand opportunities for the youth in terms of those that are trying to enter the workforce. We'd like it to be a starting wage. And then, again, get the people the skills they need to enter a career, whether it be in manufacturing, construction, anything else. Not everyone has to go to college. And as somebody just pointed out before I got on, I was listening. We have a lot of people out there with college degrees that are competing for positions where there are more people with the degrees than the jobs exist. We have the opposite in the skilled area right now. We don't have enough people to fill the jobs that are out there.
Thanks so much, Bonnie Stewart from CBIA. I got to take a break. Real quick response to that, Jim Stoddard, and then we'll jump into a break.
One misimpression that the previous speaker may have or may give is that when she says that the minimum wage just keeps ratcheting up, yeah, in nominal terms, but when you adjust for inflation, at its height in 1968 in current dollars, it was almost $11 an hour today. If it had risen at the rate of inflation, that's what it would be today. So 1010 isn't even getting all the way up there. If it had actually grown at the level of labor productivity, how much more workers are producing in terms of profits for their companies, it would be almost $20 an hour. So it's not a high wage. And compared to most advanced industrial countries that have minimum wages, we're very, very low.
All right, we're going to grab a quick break here. We got a lot more ground to cover and hardly any time to do it in when we get back.
The credit cards you use, now they're gonna refuse. You got the working for the minimum wage.
How about a maximum wage? Why does nobody ever talk about that? Today's show was produced by Betsy Kaplan and me. Our intern is Anna Novak. Katie Tolarski is our executive producer, and Greg Hill appeared in the intro and tweets for us at WNPR Colin. The part of Bill Curry was played by Jonah Hill. For articles, show pages, and photos of the Faith Middleton Show staff trying to make the Angry Whopper sandwich meal, visit our website, WNPR.org. On tomorrow's show, a Noel Coward play sparks a conversation on the past, present, and future of the closet. And now, back to Colin.
I wish we had a lot more time, but we do have some time. And Victor, you could tell them how to make the Angry Whopper sandwich meal. Just quickly before we get to our next guest, Victor Burgos, a minimum wage worker at Burger King. You were listening to Bonnie Stewart from CBIA talk about that bright future. I'm sure you'd like to have that bright future too, that training, that job. But I also assume that right now you are making minimum wage, and you think it needs to be more than it is.
Yes. Because as of right now, we make a minimum wage, and if I wanted to go to school to try to further my education, who gonna pay my bills?
Exactly. That's part of the problem. All right. So one of the things that we talk about, and we've talked about today, is the potential ripple effect of raising the minimum wage. In other words, if the minimum wage goes up, does the rising tide lift all boats? Is there any reason to suppose that? All right. So, Jim, is that Jim Stoddard's, by the way, I should reintroduce our guest. Krista Alessandro is a voiceover talent with an MBA. She works various jobs, including one for minimum wage. Jim Stoddard, a professor who teaches economics at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. So is there a reason, is there a basis, a statistical model or something we can look at and say, yeah, that'll happen? In other words, if Victor starts making $10.10, somebody further up the line, or Chris starts making $10.10 an hour, somebody further up the line will get bumped up somehow.
Sure. I mean, there's good empirical evidence of that. And like I said, the CBO report, which again a number of very conservative economists have referenced for some of its findings, but they don't represent the whole of the report. Show that about half as many people are raised up by the minimum wage, but who start out above it as people who are. They reckon that if you're making up to about $11.50 an hour, that you would get some positive effect. And there's there's a general redistribution. This is another point that I think hardly ever gets made. People that are against this on principle always talk about the job effects, and the job effects are something to worry about. But I think they don't oftentimes say part of the reason that they're against it is it's a redistributive program. It winds up, and again, the CBO report gives some numbers on that, and basically the bottom 75% of the income distribution benefits from the rise. Even people that are very close to the top quarter. Above that, in general, they lose because the higher prices effect will wipe out. For them, they're not getting those low wages to begin with, but also cut into profits to some extent.
There's a sort of a psychological concept that kind of looks at that whole question of how people make decisions about anything and what kinds of benchmarks they use for that. One of the terms for that is anchoring. Here to talk about that is Barry Schwartz, a psychology professor at Swarthmore College. He recently wrote about this in Slate.com. So, Barry Schwartz, tell us about the concept of anchoring and how it would affect the minimum wage debate.
Sure. Well, the general concept is if you go into a store and you see a suit, let's say you're shopping for a suit, you see a suit for $1,200, and then you look at a suit for $600, and the question is that a lot of money to spend on a suit? The fact that you just looked at a suit that's $1,200 is going to make you think that a $600 suit is reasonable. Even random numbers thrown out at us are going to influence the evaluations we make of the things we're contemplating buying. Real estate agents who insist that they're completely unaffected by the list price of houses because they know the market so well, it turns out are dramatically affected by the list price of houses. In general, we grab onto any numerical value we can find and then use that as an anchor and adjust from that anchor to make a decision about how valuable something else is. So the point that I made in the Slate piece is that raising the minimum wage will have effects for people who are working for the minimum wage, but it will also have effects that go significantly above that in the income distribution, because if the minimum wage is $7.25, then making $10 an hour is pretty good. If the minimum wage is $10, then making $10 isn't pretty good anymore. And so what's going to happen, I think, is a bumping up of wages all along the bottom of the wage distribution, and that will probably have a major impact on the number of people who make it into the middle class.
So, and it's interesting, the studies that you cited in the article, it does almost indicate an unconscious bias towards this.
It's completely unconscious. As I say, these real estate agents who've had a lot of experience and know the market insist that when they're making a judgment about what a house will sell for, they're looking at the location, the condition of the house, the size of the house, and so on, and the asking price is just irrelevant. And they're wrong. The asking price has a big impact on the estimate they make. It's quite unconscious, and even experts are affected by anchors, people who really, in some sense, ought to know better. So it seems to me quite plausible that minimum wage increase would trickle up.
All right. This is
substantially.
This is a great point. We're going to have to end that conversation. In fact, I'm going to have to sort of begin thanking everybody. Jim, did you have a quick point you wanted to make, or in about 30 seconds?
Let me come back to you if possible.
All right. So, first of all, I just want to say thanks to everybody who called up, and I'm really sorry. There's a bunch of you sitting on hold right now that I can't get to. Pat, Mary, Brian, David. I just can't open a whole new can of worms. I've only got 60 seconds left. I do want to thank all the people who did participate today. That was Jim Stoddard, professor who teaches economics at Rensselaer Polytechnic. Chris D'Alessandro, voiceover talent. She's got an MBA, but she's also, like a lot of people out there, holding a lot of different jobs, including one for minimum wage. Victor Burgos is a minimum wage worker at Burger King. I predict that will not be the case the next time I see you, Victor. Big things are going to happen, whether it's one of those CBIA programs or something else. Meanwhile, I'd love to see you making a little bit more money to help support the beautiful daughter who's fallen asleep in your lap there, Isabella, who's been a very well-behaved guest on this show today. And thanks to everybody who helped out on the show, especially Betsy Kaplan, who, as usual, has pulled this thing together for us. We'll be back tomorrow with a conversation based a little bit on the Hartford Stage Company play about life in the closet and the decisions that people still have to make as they decide how to share their sexuality, their sexual orientation with the rest of the world.
Hey, Greg?
Yeah, Kion Wolf?
I wanted to know if you maybe wanted to have dinner with me sometime. I make minimum wage, so we would share ramen.
No, I'll pass, but thanks.
But I saved an extra flavor packet for you.